So my name is Elvis Acapul. I'm with BNIM Architects, and I'm standing here with April Trotter and Kylie Schwaller. Um, BNIM worked on a project this ACAW session that was involved with kind of mocking up a light shelf that can be integrated into kind of maybe a more typical brick rainscreen facade system. BNIM is an architecture firm that was founded in Kansas City maybe 50 years ago. We've got studios in Des Moines and San Diego, and then other collaborators around the United States. But around that time as well, um, you know, scientists started to notice that the Arctic was warming 4 times faster than the rest of the world. And so a lot of the practice is focused on sustainable architecture, trying to cut down emissions and carbon footprint for the projects we're working on. And in some ways, it's a particular challenge in the different markets we're working in. We're not doing, that many extremely high profile projects. A lot of the work we're doing, especially in Kansas City, are smaller infill pieces. A lot of it's adaptive reuse. And so what we've been trying to do is come up with ways to improve the performance of our buildings that are also scaled to the economies of the projects that we're working on. And so for the past 15 years or so, we've been developing these stainless steel and aluminum light shelf prototypes that have been kind of R&D'd on real projects as we've been developing them. They're really lightweight, and they can kind of integrate into all sorts of different contexts, reflecting daylight into the building, but also, preventing direct glare. But they also aren't extremely integrated into some of the projects. I mean, that's an attachment. So we were invited this year, I think, in one way because we had an amazing opportunity to work with Andy Brayman on an infill project in downtown Kansas City a few years ago. This is a parking structure, and we worked really closely with Andy to come up with an ornamental system to really express kind of the tectonic realities of precast concrete parking garage with the open ventilation holes in between the rebar. And in the similar spirit, what we wanted to look at with the project this year in the mock-up was another infill project near the decommissioned headquarters for the Kansas City Star newspaper, which is a lovely old Italianate newspaper printing office building that actually has a combination of brick and terracotta ornamentation, and using that as the jumping off point and inspiration for the work that April and Kylie are going to describe here shortly. But I think this goes back to a project that we had on the boards 10 years ago for an energy technology center for the Tarrant County Community College outside of Dallas. The project was built, but the integrated solar shades in the windows were not. And so we thought this would be an interesting opportunity to take that idea and then tweak it for the Kansas City Star project that April will show you some renderings of here shortly.
All right. So kind of taking off from the precedent that we're looking at here, we started to think about particularly the baguette and what that means, how a horizontal louver can create this sort of sunshade, as well as a light shelf into the building. And we were particularly interested in terracotta because of its similar properties to brick, and being in the Midwest, there's a lot of brick around that we wanted to integrate into. So this is where we ended, but I'll kind of tell you how we got there. So we had some particular design goals. Again, we wanted to integrate into the facade, a typical rainscreen brick facade. We wanted to perform on a solar basis. High performance integrated design is something that BNIM really prides itself on. And then, oh, sorry, let me go back. We also wanted it to be aesthetically pleasing from all sides. So not only just from the front facade, from below when you're looking up, maybe to a second or third story, from inside the building looking out as well. We wanted it to be attainable in the Midwest, and we also wanted it to be adaptable to different designs. So although we had a building that we used as a basis of design, we wanted it to be something that could be kind of integrated across different projects and explored in other ways. So we started off with the module of a typical brick, and for the what we're calling the brick piece or the brick unit, we kind of doubled it in length and then doubled it in width. And the double width was kind of our basis because of the weight of a brick. And we wanted it to be able to be mortared into an overall brick wall. And so that double brick was the biggest we could get. And then for the louver unit, we went a little bit bigger and actually tripled it in width and then tripled it in depth as well. So starting with that, we kind of did walk through a bunch of explorations of different profiles of this brick unit and this louver unit and how those could integrate into the facade. And it actually ended up with this kind of sculpting method where we kind of cut off the corner diagonally to help play with shadows and then angled the top of it. And the reason that we angled it in that certain way on the brick unit was, again, for the weight and for the entire unit to be mortared into the facade. And then for the louver, we did the same approach, but actually sloped the entire top surface so that you could, again, start to get that shadow play. And as these elements kind of march across the facade, all the profiles meet up and create different shadows. And so now I'll give it over to April to talk about the structural process.
All right, so now that we had a unit, we simultaneously needed to figure out how we were going to manufacture it. So we started thinking that we would do an extruded form, but it ultimately ended up with a ram press product. With the extruded spline manufacturing and structural approach, we had issues with the length and the weight of our terracotta unit, having some torsion issues, and then it also led us into looking at more of a custom clip to go the full length of our piece. But with that custom clip, we were running into different clay wall thicknesses, and it was just getting overly complicated for what we were going for. And when you are slicing and cutting a unit in multiple angles or directions, it would start to expose the different cavities to keep those clay wall thicknesses the same. And for this project, it just didn't make sense. So we went to ram pressed, which opened up the opportunity to have a bottom surface to design. All right, so with that web structure, the awesome part about it is it's the terracotta itself creating its own structure. So the unit can stand on its own, which is great. So anyways, with that webbing, we got an opportunity to look at inspiration, started looking at biomimicry and what lines made sense for our unit. We found out really fast that there are a lot of parameters in the manufacturing process that became design opportunities, but clay wall thickness, cell cavity size, that ultimately landed with more of a gridded pattern. Okay, so as far as getting it up on a building, so we looked at a few different steel structures. The one on the far right of the bottom was a vertical steel post within the curtain wall or window system with a steel plate that would go and attach to our louver. But we didn't like the interruption of steel in our typical openings. So then we talked about doing a steel tube or some sort of steel structure in the center of our ram pressed piece. But ultimately having that in the center, while it got rid of the exposed steel everywhere, it made it the cells too small to be manufactured easily. So we worked with Eric Verboon at Walter P. Moore to get a steel tube that could run the width of our typical unit or window opening, and it wouldn't exceed the height of the back of our terracotta unit. And then we basically go out from the steel tube with some fins that the terracotta piece sits on with recessed pockets, so we don't see the steel in our jointing of our units. And so you can see that section on the right-hand side. And then just quickly, at the beginning, we said our design goal was to be as integrated as we can into a typical brick rain screen wall. So you can see here in plan that we have our undulating units that ultimately come back to our brick, the typical brick sizing. And then our steel structure basically has a removable clip that can tie back into our walls, which allows it to ultimately be placed in an existing window or in a new construction building. And then on the right-hand side, I think one thing that we found a lot of, well, anyways, on our process of building this mock-up, where we found that the fact that our brick pieces were truly mortared in and not steel or bolted in was very successful, because trying to bolt it together was quite complicated. So anyways, there are mortar pockets built into the brick pieces in sections. So that's kind of that dumbbell shape that you see, to give it some depth, and it can be just tied back to the structure with typical masonry clips. And then just quickly a solar study. There are different configurations that this could be placed. I think depending on where you are, what facade side you're on, the spacing of them can change. But we wanted to make sure that the length allowed for overlapping lines, so we don't have too much glare and direct sunlight coming in. On the right-hand side, that's just us at Andy's studio, looking at a couple different glazes and how much direct light or glaring light would bounce off, because we knew that being, a 12-inch deep louver, that there's opportunity for glare, so we wanted to be careful. And then we just studied a few different raking techniques and glazing to see how opaque or not we wanted the glazing to be. And then I think the biggest question for us for glazing was whether or not it was an on-go with glazing on top, or if we wanted a darker clay body with one glazing on top. And ultimately, we did go with a dark clay body with a white kind of medium opacity, so you could get some pooling on the unit. And so this is our unit. Anything to add to the mock-up?
I just wanted to mention that, one of the awesome opportunities that we don't get a lot out of being in Kansas City was being so close to Andy Brayman's studio. And so a lot of this process was done in face-to-face or mask-to-mask collaboration with Andy, prototyping physical objects, which was just so much more fun than the typical computer work that we're doing all the time. So I wanted to shout out to Andy for that, and of course to everyone else at Boston Valley for the collaboration.
Thank you. Good point. So in this image, you can see our steel fins essentially getting wrapped and formed into our terracotta unit. And then, if we had a project that was going at the same time, this is a project that we're doing next to the Kansas City Star building that Elvis talked about earlier, to get these units kind of undulate across the facade, bring interest and design opportunity within the offices itself, so you can see the exposed cell. It would obviously take more iteration, but it's exciting to see it on something. Well, thank you.